Hi. I haven't seen you in a long time. I've got kind of a long poem here, and I'm going to try to get through it as quickly as I can. But you guys haven't seen me in a while because it's been the hardest year of my life. I got my heart ripped out, then I got real angry at the world, and then I finally got close to someone with the suggestion of my therapist that I open my heart, and he shot himself in the heart a couple months ago. I was the last person to see him alive. It doesn't really matter what score I get tonight, that's not important to me. I have two other super hip, cool, slammy kind of poems that I have memorized, but this one I gotta get out in the ether. Thank you. My friend's name was Michael Payne Palmer, and as much as you can summarize a person, he was 22 years old, he was number 3 in the world kayak champion, number 3 in the world. He had a 3-year-old son, he had a long blonde ponytail, and he loved poisonous things. He liked to pick up black widow spiders and rattlesnakes, because he was crazy like that. And as much as there's a lot of talk about suicide, it's never touched my life like this before, and I just want to say that you gotta speak your truth. Write your poetry, sing your songs, talk to your friends, don't give up. So this one's for Michael. It's called Missing Doesn't Cut It. Of a million layers, missing is one tear. It's how we killed deer. It's how we hunted turkeys. And I fear it was an unworthy course for such a golden captain to steer into waters so murky. Not a fraction of it clear, and no caption or quote could come anywhere near explaining the feeling when one of the good ones runs off this earth by choice. His voice spins on a turntable in my mind, and I'm unable to find a way to hear it without falling to my knees. I say, please, Michael, tell me you will be around. I will be so fucking angry if you are not around. And in a resounding tone so silky and convincing, he says with his hands grasped tight around my shoulders, of course I'll be around, Teal, without so much as flinching. And with bright light beaming from his eyes, he bolsters a confident smile, all the while carving out a dark plan. And I believe him. And I take his hand and say, good. And he stands with such conviction in the parking lot glow, and I'm haunted still by what I thought as my heart rate slowed. Our hug goodbye was quiet and long, and it occurred to me he was already gone. And I couldn't just say some cliche like, Michael, be strong, because he knew people who stuck to scripts like that were just flat wrong. I couldn't just turn on some inspirational song and put my arm around him while we both sang along and smiled knowingly. And no music or amount of fortitude could have prepped me or set the mood for the trials he'd be throwing at me. A month earlier, we'd met on the river trail, and straight away we set sail on a sea we both needed to explore. I had slammed a door so tight, and he opened it to a radiant light I hadn't glimpsed in ages. And I winced like a vampire in those yellow rays as his sage's voice spoke truth to say, there is a stench of doubt coming off of you. You're overdue for a bath in the blue sky. And I tried to fight him even then like a dog being forced into a pen, but I couldn't see he was taking me out of the cage. All I could see was red and gray rage painted by the hand I was dealt. But in his eyes all my lovely colors were deeply seen and deeply felt. We knelt in reverence by the river the day before he died, and he asked all about me and how it was for me inside. He was entrenched in his life's toughest battle and still rattled off a list of questions for my psyche. How are you sleeping, Teal? Do you feel trapped or free? How can I help? When you shut your eyes, what do you see? He carelessly let his dog run off and scoffed when a woman screamed angrily as he barreled down the trail at her. But what I failed to see clear as day was that Michael had relinquished every care and responsibility that required him to stay. The pieces holding him together frayed, but before the unraveling, he saved me in so many ways. His heart was ablaze, and although he spent most of his time in water, he could not cool the burn. And so in turn, he gave way to the flame. And we all search for blame in the wake of destruction, but it's not as cut and dry as a tornado where you know the source of the deadly suction. And a gun in the hand of a worn and weary man can leave all beauty torn, and equal devastation in the heavy span of one moment. Can there be atonement after such an assault? And can you dare to throw out words like why and whose fault? I don't think so. I think human words blow away like summer cotton when such ill-begotten travesty strikes, and your heart rate spikes when you try to use language to explain it. In this foreign hollow pit, I refrain from talking altogether lately, and it is greatly scrutinized, as I have always been such a talker. And if I said what I really thought, I believe they'd all surmise, well, she's off her rocker. And what a surprise, what a shocker. No one really understands or says the right words or just holds my hand and lets me be heard. And the lines that people regurgitate are absurd. But Michael never once told me to keep my chin up, because he knew, like I knew, that people who blew that kind of smoke had never cracked their chin open while it was up, or choked back tears when life gave them the stiff uppercut. And you don't just strut and stride easy when your legs buckle beneath you from the disingenuine human lies that just make you queasy. I watched the breezy, shimmering light drain from his face one night as he lost a fight with a vicious, drooling ogre in his brain. He blinked incessantly, and pain is too weak a word in my retelling of it. I watched him sit expelling a muted panic, the quick and frequent blinking like an attempt to squeeze the terrors he was thinking out from the cranial opening. Out from any cranial opening they would fit through. But they couldn't be removed. They had chewed holes in his temporal armor. And you would never guess those gaping spaces were working to erase him, because on the surface, he was such a damn charmer. And I could see him worrying. Have I alarmed her? Have I shown her too much? As he clutched an empty rum bottle, continually holding it above his mouth, taking swigs of air. And in my soothing voice, I said, Michael, not a drop in there. And I got up and I crouched behind him and I stroked his hair, imagining we were sacred mer people from some ancient lure. I poured myself along the length of his back, thinking I could act as a salve for his full body wound. And I tuned all my frequencies to healing and love and propped my head above his like my intentions were a helmet and my limbs were a shield. And I yielded all the juju I ever acquired, but all the juju simply wouldn't do to pull him from the mire. He couldn't be inspired to hang around long enough for a swim in my mermaid lagoon or swoon for any of my other whimsical attempts to sway his path. My energy wrapped in ribbons was sent, but I could not pray hard enough on his behalf. There's no math that makes it line up the way it should, no shiny color to make it look good. But he stood by my side when all I wanted was to burrow down and hide, and that was enough. He saw all my rough sides and uneven shapes, the flowers and the weeds, without skating on the surface, without boring pleasantries. And I must mention a day amongst the trees, my favorite Michael memory. We hadn't hung out but a handful of times, but I felt I didn't need to obey those human confines. There was no big scary lines drawn in the sand with Michael. That stagnant cycle didn't apply with him. You could fly instead of hobble and dive in instead of skim. My green paradise hiking grin faded and I paused on the mountain trail, eyes wet, breath bated, and I said, I know we don't have all the pieces we need to really know each other, but I believe you could be the person I've been calling out for, the one strong enough to hold me without trying to get anything more, to just step up and really grab hold of me the way you do when it's the only thing in the world that needs doing. Because if someone doesn't hold me like that soon, I think I'm going to die. Or worse, my spirit will. And on the slant of the hill, he wrapped his kayak champion arms around me and breathed. No need for one more word that would be a waste. He embraced me for 7 whole minutes, and we were limitless once again. My new princely hardy hunter friend. And the moment ended as all moments do, but this end was perfect and funny and true. A bike came speeding along the trail, and the rider yelled, "Excuse me," and barreled between us, with just enough time for us to jump back. And we laughed like we had a knack for it, though in truth I had not heard my own laughter in months. And for once, someone else needed that release just as much as me. And I hope his soul still laughs with such buoyant ease. I hope he is swimming in calm. And whoever's in charge, please take no qualms with his sudden exit. For there was a snarling demon and he just couldn't best it. His mind so heavy and full, do not pull at it more, but wash ashore those troubled thoughts as glorious seashells to be treasured by innocent hands and reborn. Adorn him with a headdress of owl feathers and bright-colored daisies. He was a warrior of bone and water. Let not his feverish brain grow hotter, yet cool it in a wave of peaceful blue. And while it is said, this too shall pass, alas, I know it will never leave our hearts. But I now also know a soul never stops. It only restarts.